Okay, we'll call the meeting to order at 6:30. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, actually 6:35. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda is correspondence, visitors, and public comment. Is there anyone here who would like to make public comment this evening? Ty? Just state your name and town of residency, please.
Ty Swanyer, Highgate. I got a list of comments that I'm going to ask in question form. No intention to get an answer tonight. Stuff to think about. The business meetings. And, how it's perceived to some public is it's just another way that makes it harder for the public to keep track of what's going on. I think Don mentioned at the beginning of the business meeting that having Northwest Access would help. So it would definitely help myself as the public to know what's going on. If you've taken away a little bit from the readings of the financial reports, where you have to read them on screen and not actual in live meetings, it feels a lot like you're making it harder for the public to know what's going on in this district. That's all I got on that one. I'm going to say it before Yeshua talks about his admin report, but question I have for the board is, do you ever get sick of hearing the admin reports? They're always, we did this great, we did this great. In a school system, there's no way it's all good. I want to hear about, if I was on the board, I want to hear about what you're not doing great and what you're trying to make better. Not, this was good, this was good, all the time. Another one for the board is, do you do walkthroughs? Before Act 46, I know the local boards, we're in schools here and there all the time. And does anybody feel like they would be welcome to do a walkthrough and see what's actually going on at schools during the normal business day? And then the last one is, we need to figure out why kids that are in high school are willing to leave the high school that they grew up with friends in since they were kindergarten to go to another district that's 10 or 15 minutes away because they feel our district is failing them. They're good kids, academic kids. They feel the district's failing them, and I don't know why. I got a lot of opinions why, but you need to look into it. And if any board member wants to talk to me about any of my concerns, you can reach out to Julie for my contact, or Wendy at the town clerk of Highgate for my contact, and I'd love to hear from somebody to talk about concerns that I see on a daily basis.
All right. Thank you, Ty. Any other public comments this evening?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think I'm a member of the public, although in some ways I am. I think the gentleman makes some really good points. In fact, some of the things he's just said here tonight, I hear in Swampton. I hope that access will be here at 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock may be a little inconvenient, but these are all taped and played, right? So people can access them anytime they want, which is good. But if anybody wants to come 6 o'clock, it may be a little inconvenient. But I think that in our interest to try to have efficient meetings, we may be losing contact with some of our citizens. Some of our people that we want to vote for the budget. In fact, I've just had a little downtime over Thanksgiving and started thinking about the upcoming budget and all the talk and all the work we do to try to get out to people. And then I think of something like maybe not being as transparent, not intentionally, but like this meeting, the business meeting. And I think that sometimes the decisions we make in the tone of efficiency is a negative with that public. And I don't want to belabor it tonight, but I think you make some really good points. And I hope as board that we don't forget them and just move on, because, you know, as a board member, and I'm glad that Yesha's here tonight, because I have some questions about his report. But it seems to me we've lost contact also with our building administrators. So maybe I'm just a voice in the dark, but I thank you for raising these issues, because they are legit. It's not the first time I've heard it.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, just a quick question, good for Doc.
Sure.
Do you have kids in the school system?
Yes, I do.
Here at Highgate, or are you?
And we came through Highgate.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other, anyone online for public comments? Seeing none. All right, we're on to agenda review. Any amendments to tonight's agenda?
I don't want to make an amendment, but when I'm looking at budget, we have the budget draft first and then the community input survey next, and I'm wondering if it makes more sense to flip those.
I think it likely does, yes. Let's change the order of those two. All right, next we have opportunity for any discussion on the administrative reports. Don, I know you had some things, so I'll hand it off.
And you know, it was said here tonight, and I know I've talked with Julie and other people, and I appreciate their answer. But the question I'm gonna ask Yesser tonight, if I call him at the school and ask him to call me back when it's time convenient, and he answers my question, I have to believe that the answer should be of interest to every board member, not just me one-on-one. So I just wanna keep talking about this mechanism with administrators interacting with the board principals. So in reading your report, it was a very good report, by the way. I enjoyed reading it. A lot of good information, but it is information, and I miss the potential dialogue as I read it. One of the things you talked about, teachers' evaluations, it says you do 10 a year, you're kicking into the process, which certainly is timely.
Yeah.
So I don't know about the other board members, but I've forgotten to some extent the process, because there's certainly more than 10 teachers here in Highgate. And
Yes.
so if you have 40, does that mean it goes 4 years before a teacher gets an evaluation?
I think it's actually, I have drafted a schedule. I think it's more like every 5 that I have it right now. With the 10 that I sent to you are those that are all first, second, or a 3rd-year probationary teachers. So there's actually not any veteran staff in that total number.
Okay, so what happens to the veteran staff?
There's no, well, there will be a couple of them doing formal evaluation in a cycle, just like the other 10. I have a Google form that is based on kind of all of our initiatives through the year that I go in classrooms and I actually fill that out, and it's sent to the teacher as feedback of, so things that are on there right now is some of the writing stuff we do, the math we're really focused on, parts of my mission, vision statement that I've made, and then the framework is on there too. So it's all the things we're focusing on as a school. A lot of it comes from in-service, all the major topics we talked about, and then I put it in there, and it's a way for me also to see that PD we're actually offering, am I seeing it happening in classroom? That's actually one of my goals as a principal this year, is that the PD that's being offered is actually happening in classrooms, in hopes that we're seeing success from students.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, maybe I should wait till future agenda items, but it's sometime between now and the end of the school year. I'd like to have an agenda item where Julie and the principals and whoever come in and talk to us about our employee evaluation system. Not just teachers, but employees. Because I'm a strong believer that people need to know what their job is, and they need to get regular feedback on how well they're doing that, or if there's any discussion about things that maybe need to change, not necessarily improve. So I thank you for that, but I would hope it would lead to a bigger discussion throughout the district.
Okay.
Would we be able to get a copy of that Google document that you send out to the teachers, or
Yeah, it's a Google
not
form.
one filled
Yeah.
out by them, but just, I'd like to see what the
Yeah,
document
I
looks
absolutely
like.
do that.
And I did have one other administrative question. I'll ask Julie because Chris Dodge is not here. Chris wrote about trimester reports.
Mhm.
Now, we are one district, MVSD. Do we have some people on quarters and some on semesters and some on trimesters?
Yes, we do. I think all the elementary schools are trimesters and MVU is semester.
Yep.
And
I
Highgate
had
is,
to look at him because it was the opposite in my previous district.
so all elementary trimesters now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
What kind of feedback are we getting on that? Seems
I
like it's a long
don't think any
time
actually,
from-
but I don't warrant feedback either, right? So I haven't asked anyone, but yeah,
All right. Thank you.
yeah, of course.
Any other questions or discussion on the admin reports?
Just that, like I said in the earlier meeting, the elementary schools, I was pleased with updating us on literacy and mathematics and how they're doing and what they're doing, and I would like to, you know, as we heard tonight, everything's not always rosy, so I'd like to see more of what we're doing to try to improve where we're weak and where we need improvement, and I think this is a good place for that.
And just a comment on that, I think also our district data days, that's what time we're looking at trends too, is we're looking at all the data we have, and we're trying to identify trends, and certainly for Highgate, we are trying to identify the trend that needs work, and that will actually probably come up tonight.
Basically what this presentation is about.
Yeah, actually, pretty much, yes.
All right, any other admin report requests?
Is John Lumsden considered an administrator as far as reports? But I do have a question for him.
He is a non-union professional. He's not a licensed administrator.
So maybe I'll just share it with you. He had a report about how many students were participating and a meeting with parents. And I was very surprised that a pretty sizable minority of parents didn't attend. And I can't tell you that's recent, but I know some point in my career, I worked for schools where in order to play a sport, the parent had to attend a meeting each year. If you played 3 sports, then you'd have to come to 3 of them. But you had to come to one, preferably the first one. And if we have a third or a fourth of the parents not showing up for a meeting with the coaches and players, I think there's potential for problems, so I would pass that off by you.
I will do that. We're gonna be meeting to be talking about, athletic procedures and things anyway, so I think that's a good topic to.
That is the end of the list.
All right.
Don, I just wanted to comment that one of your comments you made is very accurate, and that the reason why there was probably a low attendance is, so correct me if I'm wrong, Toby, what we're into a second sport of the year, correct? So most parents, a lot of their kids will
So
play.
they came to the
Well,
first
they
one.
play, yeah, they play soccer, basketball, and softball.
Yeah.
So they attend the first one, and then because it's such a repeat, it's the same one for every sport, then they don't.
And that's good to know, so that's what I would like to know. If he says everybody came to the first one, then there's no need for second and third.
And I fully agree that they should be at least attending one
Yeah.
for the school year.
Yeah.
But that's usually what happens.
We have a public comment.
What I find, Don, on that topic is they're very hesitant on making anything mandatory now. And I don't know, and when you make something mandatory, parents think that they have a different definition of what mandatory really means. So, that's what I see personally.
Peter, did you have something?
Yeah, just the MVU report, athletics, I was pleased to see the schedule now, they're more formal hiring practices and the dates in there, and I know Toby, you brought this up in the past, so
Yeah, that was a good plus.
I think that was glad to see it.
Yeah, it was, we take input very seriously.
I was pleased to see it. I think it's important for the public to know I have always found, and I've always been surprised at the willingness of all our administrators to, one, listen to our feedback and almost always perform some action to address it. We might not always agree, but so I've never been frustrated that I'm saying things on deaf ears. I think I've always been impressed with the administration at all levels in all our buildings. They definitely hear us, and they definitely do whatever they can in their capacity and powers to address issues. So, and it might not be as timely as we all want it, but I've always been, and even before I was on the board, a board member, I've always been. It's hard because when you're a parent, especially with a concern, you want something to happen, but good things sometimes take time. So.
Bonnie and worked really hard with John to make sure that took place, so thank you for that shout out.
Alright, so we're gonna move on to the presentation discussion items portion of the agenda, which I do hope will satisfy some of the comments we received in public comment session, where we are trying to spend a lot of time in these meetings letting administrators dive into the data and tell us about their challenges and the responses to those challenges. So Yeshua, I'll turn it over to you, and please introduce anyone else that
I will.
joins in.
Don't you worry. So I do have, it looks like a nice crew here tonight, but I want to start with Michelle Patnode, who is in the back. She's actually getting her administrative license, and I'm her mentor. She's also a first grade teacher here, but she came here to experience a board meeting, which is great. And then the other three, I'll let you introduce yourselves.
But before we start,
sorry, go ahead.
can we have these people here? You know I have a little hearing problem, but I like to see people, and I don't like to have anybody have their back to people, so can we kind of scooch around and bring them out?
Best place for us to stay.
Come and pull chairs up.
Or-
You can all move.
Everyone's moving at once, so you're gonna have to climb it in the eight rows.
Find this room. Find this room.
Yeshua and I, yeah.
They all sit over there. I'll be
Now you're one of us. You're not them, you're one of us. Thank you, Derek.
Sure. My name is Eric Becker. My official title here at Highgate is SEL Coordinator. For those who don't know, SEL stands for Social Emotional Learning. I'm kind of a hybrid position, so I play some of the roles an assistant principal would play, but my bigger role here is to try to help kind of be the liaison between students and families and discipline, and try to connect those three things into one seamless opportunity. I think we all know parents are the primary educators of their students, and so as we're hearing at this meeting, our goal is really to make sure parents are aware of what is going on with their students and make sure they have a part in helping us get them on track. And then thanks to a lot of initiatives within the district to really start to develop those social skills that students have grown to lack because of the opportunities that are provided to them through technology and through limited social interaction. So we're rebuilding skills that I think were once part of our daily lives that are now diminished because of the conveniences we live with. And so my goal is to try and bridge that gap a little bit and bring our students back to some of those traditional looking folks in the eye, having communication skills, recognizing emotions and managing them in an appropriate way, not discouraging them from sharing them, but finding the right way to share them, and then providing support around how we deal with the challenges we all face today in the world. So that's kind of my spiel about me.
So I'm Edna Iannico, I'm the literacy coach here at Highgate.
Kristen Hughes, math coach, far less elaborate than introduction.
All right, so we will get started, and we are each going to try to take 5 minutes in hopes that this is only 20 minutes, because we feel like we could probably talk to you for hours about data. So really, I had titled it Data, 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 and responding to it, because I think at Highgate, one strength we really have is looking at results and talking about what we're going to do about it, because we certainly have students that are achieving, and we have students who are not achieving, and we need to make sure we're responding to all of that. And so I really enjoyed this quote just to kind of get us started about every student can learn, just not in the same day or in the same way, and that's kind of intervention when we get to it, either tier 1, tier 2, or 3. And then these are just the 4 main topics we're going to be discussing, which is why I invited a few of our folks here. So we're talking about math and how we're responding to data, literacy, We want to do some behavior comparisons because from last year to now, we've seen some improvement and we've restructured our behavior support team, which we think has helped with that improvement. And then I'm going to talk to you about the outdoor classroom.
Okay, that means me. So when we talk about math, I want to be very clear that when we respond to data, our new program has really made responding to data very systematic. So in combination with the new program and STAR 360, which is our universal screening tool, we actually can respond to data quickly. And quickly is key because we want to make sure that when we intervene, we engage kids and we can provide opportunities for them to engage in the grade level content at that point. For example, we don't necessarily see that helping a student subtract across zeros is really beneficial when they're working with fractions. We'll get to the subtracting across zeros, but it might not be till we're talking about division, which is kind of part of the procedure at that point. What we want to intervene on is what they need right now. We have kind of 3 different data points that help us guide through instruction. That first one is that universal screener, the STAR 360. And that we do 3 times a year. It adjusts to where kids are. It asks them questions based on their answers. So it kind of gives us a picture of the math learner at that point. It also helps flag kids that might need extra support throughout the year or at certain points throughout the year. The second data point is our program checkpoints, and I want to use that word program so that it's referencing sort of that new math program at this point. And there are built-in checkpoints throughout each math unit. And this helps us kind of highlight the most important skills of that unit. Tonight I'm going to talk primarily about the first checkpoint, which is actually considered a pre-assessment, which highlights the foundational skills that kids need to get into that unit to be able to access the grade level content. Finally, I want to highlight the intervention checkpoints. And these are how we monitor what kids are learning, kind of referring back to that fraction thing. We want to be able to make sure that they understand how to read a diagram and how it represents a fraction. But we also want to use some of that data to understand if they're applying what they learned about that fractional diagram in the classroom setting to equivalent fractions. Does it actually transfer? It's kind of an important distinction that we want to see not only if we assess the targeted skill, but we also want to make sure that the intervention worked. On this kind of data point, you can see this is our 360. This is a look at grade level data. In the fall this year, we saw that the green and blue, about 60% of the grade level was at, near, or above proficiency level, which leaves us to the 40% that were assessed at kind of needing intervention or even needing urgent intervention. In the years past, we would have looked at that yellow and red section and said, we need to do some diagnostic tools to find out what's going on, to see what skills these kids are missing. Our responses changed a little bit this year. Instead of assessing skills with a diagnostic tool that can sometimes result with a laundry list of missing skills, we're actually using the program checkpoints to determine which skills the kids are missing and need at that point. So, if we take a look at the next slide, that's a snapshot of one of the program checkpoints. This is just a point in time, and this happens to be the pre-assessment for Unit 3. And as we look at this,
Click, okay. Wait, you have it. You have it fancy.
you can see that about half of the kids actually scored a 3, which tells us that they had all of the foundational skills they needed to access this current unit. There's a quarter of the kids that might have been missing one foundational skill or might have goofed on one of the calculation errors entering that kind of piece. But then there's another quarter that we're missing a little bit more substantial foundational skills. The second snapshot is the next program checkpoint that was given a week or so later. So it allowed us to sort of demonstrate growth and gave us a window of time where we could intervene on the skills that we needed and see the results a little bit later. After we kind of, in between that time, we grouped those kids along with the rest of the grade level, and we found out that basically we had 3 groups of kids that needed to focus on 3 different skills. In this case, a group needed to focus on fractions on a number line. Another group needed to focus on identifying a fraction within a diagram. The third group needed a little work on products of whole numbers. In this context here, our grade level team sort of divide and conquered. They each planned and implemented intervention sessions, 2, 3, sometimes 4 different sessions. And then throughout that intervention, they were actually able to monitor the progress on that specific goal. And then, when we were able to measure the impact of the intervention, we saw that at the next program checkpoint a week or so later. So if we take a look at the data, you can actually see that there was some growth, and I'll interpret this a little bit for you. In the first goal, where they were identifying fractions, their pre-assessment identified that 3 kids were kind of scoring under a 30% range. They needed some work. We applied an intervention. There was 2 checkpoints along the way in that light blue area, and then a week or so later we see growth. We see growth of multiple percentage points in all of the students. What we see is that, or what we can infer is that the intervention, as well as what was done at the grade level, helped students grow through that time period. While all students made progress, I do want you to see that there is one student that we still have concerns about in this point. And in this case, we'll closely monitor, keep saying it, next word. Thanks. His or her sort of skills at that point, and we need to then decide if we need a more intensive approach coming forward, or if we actually need to do a little more diagnostic work to support that student better. But it's this quick sort of turnaround and timely intervention that we're focused on, and using the tools that we have right now with the math program and then Universal Screener.
So,
I just have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
You talk about intervention. Is that in the classroom or is that outside the classroom?
Great question. It's multiple levels of intervention. That specific data was actually out of classroom. However, the time that we do intervention includes multiple resources that are being served at the same point. The special educators providing intervention, the speech language pathologist is providing intervention. In this case, on a pre-assessment skill, it could happen any place. When you get later on into the unit, we try to provide intervention physically in the classroom, and it tends to be on more grade level skills at that point, not those foundational things that we needed to sort of build in.
I just have a question. So in that 1 week when you did the intervention, then
Week to 10 days, yeah.
they caught up.
Yeah.
Do you do testing again, maybe wait 30 days to make sure that they retained that information?
The lovely thing about math is that things build on each other as you go through. So when you're taking those foundational skills, we needed those skills to access what was happening that first week. We need what was happening that first week to access what's happening that second week. And we really need the first, second, and third week to be able to access the end. So we do have that kind of built-in check by the end of the unit. What gets a little tricky is that when we jump from fractions to division next unit, sometimes we see application, sometimes it's not necessarily immediate. I will, again, kind of hype the benefits of the program too, because luckily at the end of the year for this program specifically, there's what's considered culminating performance tasks, where everything gets thrown together. So you kind of put it all in application, and you're spiraling back from what was in the beginning of the year. You know, we're trying this out right now. This is a little bit of a work in progress, but that was one of the appeals to why we chose this too. Sure.
okay. So as Kristen, excuse me, has talked to you about how they did intervention in a whole class model, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we do it with individual students. And when we're looking at data, we want to make sure that we're providing students with more and different support in a timely manner as needed. So how do we respond to an individual student's needs? So we're going to be looking at a student that we're going to be calling student A today, and I'm going to take you through the 4 steps that we go through when we are setting up their intervention program.
Okay. Oh, not good.
You could introduce the stuff.
Okay, so we start the year off with, there you Okay, so we start the year off with a STAR 360 assessment. The STAR assessment helps teachers better understand what students know and what they can do in the areas of early literacy, reading, and math. As a student takes a test, the software selects items based on a student's response. If a student answers correctly, the next question is a little bit more difficult. If a student answers incorrectly, then the next question is a little less difficult. In the fall, we use the STAR assessment to flag students. These are students that we may need more information on, and we use other assessments to get there. So any student who falls below the 40th percentile gets a deeper look. We have a variety of diagnostic assessments that we use to do that. So tonight we'll be looking at the data for just one student. So diagnostic testing. So here we see that student A scored in the 5th percentile on the STAR reading, which is in the early intervention category. The interventionist and or classroom teacher at that point then used some diagnostic tools to pinpoint the exact areas where this child is struggling. They've chosen to use 3 diagnostic assessments. They've used the Fontes and Pinnell benchmark assessment, the Teachers College high frequency words, and they've used a modified WADE, which works around phonemic awareness, to specifically target the areas of need. The data is then analyzed and an intervention plan is developed. As you can see, there's a number of areas where this student is struggling. Once the area of need is identified, there's multiple ways we can address that need, right? So these are only a couple of the ways. We have the LLI, or Level Literacy Intervention Program, that supports classroom guided reading or small group work. The program mainly focuses on accuracy, comprehension, and fluency. We also have the Wilson Reading System that directly and systematically teaches the structure of the English language. So students learn how to fluently decode, which is break words apart into individual sounds, or encode, which is to put words together from individual sounds. The Orton-Gillingham is also a structured literacy approach that we use to teach struggling readers. This approach is much more explicit and it moves at a much slower pace. Setting goals for student A. So from the data on slide 13, we see that there is a need in phonemic awareness, which is the ability to identify and manipulate individual sounds or phonemes in a spoken words. The interventionist then selects a program or approach that will best address the student's needs. As we see, the interventionist has chosen the Wilson Reading System to best fit to meet the needs of this student, and she has set her goals for the next 6 to 8 weeks, the number of times that she will be seeing that student, and for how long. Tracking student progress. So the interventionist then spends the next 6 to 8 weeks implementing the intervention sessions and tracking student progress as they go along. At the end of the first cycle, we come together as an intervention team. We look at the data for each of our intervention students. Then we determine if the intervention plan is working or not working. If it's working and the student is making progress, we stick with the plan. If the student is not making progress, we brainstorm and rework the student's plan. We continue this cycle of regrouping every 6 to 8 weeks to make decisions on the next steps for our students. So after several rounds of intervention, then what happens? So we have 3 avenues we can take. 1, the student is proficient on grade level standards. Yay, we've done our job, and we exit the student. 2, the student is making steady progress but still isn't quite up to grade level standards, so we will continue with it because they are continuing to make progress. And 3, the student is making little to no progress. Then what do? We look for more diagnostic information. It could lead to a special ed evaluation, but it doesn't necessarily need to. We probably have, maybe there's an underlying condition we didn't know about, so we need to look deeper and see if we can find that.
Behavior intervention, so I don't have a screener that I can use because obviously there's some circumstances that go into it, but what we have done is taken a similar philosophy of trying to recognize where in our day are students not getting what they need and what are the precursor things that lead to those bigger behaviors, and trying to do a more early intervention approach. And we kind of took it in 4 directions. Just to give you a comparison, and I'll get into more detail, and I will point out the scale is slightly different. These 2 graphs come directly out of our PBS Swiss discipline system. So every disciplinary action is recorded on a physical piece of paper and then entered into the system for us to track. And so you'll see one is from this year on the left-hand side, and the previous year. In the previous year, we had less minor data, so the smaller behaviors. So, for example, a child who might, if the expectation in the class is raise your hand to be called on, that's a student who might call out 15 times, right? Oh, pick me! Oh, I had no, doesn't recognize that need and reaches multiple reminders, but is still doing that. So those littler things that aren't necessarily concerning day to day, but do impact the ability of a classroom to function at its highest level. And then the major behaviors are those things which reach a precipice. So a physical altercation, I hit someone, or an intense language situation, I use a curse word, or I call someone a very derogatory name. That is a little bit outside of kind of harassment and bullying. I just want to make that clear. We certainly do track that and have a very intense district policy, which I'm sure you're very aware of, but it would be more of like, you're stupid, I hate you, things like that that would be unexpected that we don't want kids saying, but are usually an offshoot of an emotion they're struggling with. So you'll see in the previous year, we noticed that there were major behaviors, but then a significantly low number of minor behaviors. And behavior research tells you that most kids don't come in with huge behaviors. It's a lot of small things that eventually lead to that big thing. And so we started looking at how we could fix that. And you'll see the data on the left-hand side shows we have a significantly higher amount of minors this year, which is a wonderful thing, even though it feels wrong to see the data go up. In our case, that data is really good, because that means we're looking at the smaller things sooner, which means we're putting in earlier interventions. And I'll flip over to kind of clarify what that looks like. So what we do with that data...
Sorry, before you go on.
Sure.
I can't see the numbers.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what those are?
Yeah, the last year we had about 200, and I can't see the full number, but it's like 292 minors and 178. 9. I knew it was somewhere in there. Majors. This year we have around 562.
572.
Okay, 572. And then we do have a few more minors. It's like 210. But what I will say, and the caveat is, we consider 5 minor behaviors a major, which sounds very complicated. But if you have 5 incidents of small behaviors in a week, we kick it up to the next level, because we're feeling like now we're establishing there's a continuous disruption in the classroom, and we want to make sure we're looking at why that's happening. So
does that mean you're counting it twice?
We're not counting it twice, but what happens is when there are more minors, there are more majors, because those 5 become majors. So as we record more minors, ultimately we get more kids who reach 5. So we're not recording it twice, but because we're recording more minors, more of those behaviors are becoming majors. I hope I'm making that clear.
And then that 21-22 is a full year?
Nope, they're exactly to the date of when there was the exact comparison date to date, which was about 2 weeks ago when we created the presentation. So it's to the minute we put those in there. It would be different today if I were to pull up that data right now, for sure.
So you said that it was encouraging to see more minors.
Yes.
Now, is that because you're thinking if you can capture the minors, you can prevent the majors from happening?
Yes, that is exactly what I'm hoping. It also gives us a better snapshot of where the deficient skills are. If we're focusing on the small behaviors, we're able to recognize, okay, this is a child who's getting 17 write-ups over 9 weeks about calling out. We have to address that. Why is he still calling out all these weeks and it's not changing, right? We always say it's easier to stop behavior than change a behavior. Minor data helps us change behavior, not just stop behavior, right? As an adult, the first few weeks of school, it's easy to say, please don't do that, please don't do that. When we reach November and fatigue kicks in, you're like, I've had enough, right? And so what we're trying to do is flip that script. If a kid in September has 12 or 13 minors around a behavior, we should be looking at an intervention we can put into place right now so that we can avoid that down the long haul when the adult is feeling more stress and unable to manage it the way they can sometimes earlier in the year. So yes, in the long-winded answer, but.
And just real quick.
Sure.
Is that, these are all the incidents that occur during the school day?
That's correct.
So does that include incidents on the bus and then after school, or does it?
It does not include the bus, although we do have a system for that we track separately for bus behavior. We don't use a minor or major system. We have a very specific discipline policy related to the bus that we use. That I could get to somebody if they want to see it for sure. I don't know if anyone.
Could we bookmark something like that at a later date?
So we get the bus
Well,
policy.
I just wanna see how that plays in, because as far as I'm concerned, the school day starts the moment they get on the bus. So I would just like to see if there's any correlation to what's then happening through the day, and then after school plays into it too, obviously.
Thank you, Rennick, for bringing that up. I've been having interaction with Julie and Devin recently about bus behavior that we won't get into now because it's not appropriate, but it would seem that as a board, we talk a lot about school safety and things, and I am personally concerned about bus behavior. In Longshore and Highgate, I say I'm very concerned about bus behavior in Highgate, if half what I'm hearing is true, but that's not for the discussion tonight. Chair indicated that would not be on the topic, but thank you for bringing that up.
And I do want to make the point that anybody who has a concern should contact the principal so it can be looked into.
Just a month ago, I did put out a request for some sort of that, and I didn't see anything about that in the reports. So maybe at a later date, we can get something about that separately booked into a future meeting.
We can say that, yeah. Take a look. See what I like it. Right. Sorry?
No, that's okay. Happy to kind of click over.
So the next slide's exciting for me. I want to get to it.
So this is kind of what we were talking about broken down, right? But often minors were not reported, so we were missing those small behaviors that led to the bigger behaviors. We've had 280 more minors this year than last year, which is a good thing, as we just talked about. That also means we should have 56 more majors, right? Because every 5 is a minor becomes a major, and so we're seeing a decrease in majors right now. So early signs point to the intervention having a positive impact, because we're getting less of those majors because we're intervening earlier on the minor behaviors and giving kids solutions and tools to avoid that. So go ahead and. So again, early intervention in minor behaviors, less than total number of major behaviors, is also giving us an indication of what else we can be doing for students. What are those things that are impacting their ability to be successful? And so that little data that feels innocuous in the total of a day, again, often is what makes the classroom the hardest to be in, and so that early intervention is helping. So here's kind of what we've designed to attack that. It's a 4-prong approach. As we talked about already, minor data, that's the starting point, right? We can't make change without data. We need to see the reality of it. The team that I directly work with at the BST, or the Behavior Support Team, we've kind of divided and conquered a little bit, and we've changed a little bit of how we respond. We have an adult that initially responds to support whatever issue is going on. So making sure in the moment the teacher and the student both have what they need, and we figure out what the student needs. We then have a person who works in our planning room, and really their main job is to process with children, right? We don't just want to say, don't do that because I said so. We want to talk to them about what's causing the behavior, what are they missing, what are they feeling, what's going on. And often our behaviors are not directly correlated to school issues. They're things that are going on outside of school that come in and they're not sure how to manage them. I've lost a pet, mom and dad had an argument, I didn't make breakfast because I overslept. All of which impact their ability to learn, but we don't always know that, right? Sometimes discipline becomes, I said this, you don't do this, you go here, and then you come back. We're trying to get much more into the, why are you feeling this way? What is going on? What is causing you to be in this moment? What are the precipitating circumstances? It also allows us to explore student relationships, which often can be a cause of behavior breakdown, so it gives us some insight into how they're being treated, how they're feeling. And then universal coaching, how can we give the adults more tools to manage it in the moment? Give them the skills and ability to recognize these things and intervene before they're reaching out to us. The closing the loop form is our particular way to do that, and I believe if you click on that, the closing the loop form will come up.
Not until the next one.
Oh, not until the next one, alright, so I'll get back to that, my apologies. Oh, you can actually click on it here, it doesn't.
What do I click on?
That.
Yeah, just click on the title.
Smash it.
So it's a 5-question form that comes directly from restorative practices. Restorative practices is a system where the relationship of the people involved is the main consideration. We do not ask students to fill this out because we don't want writing or spelling or anything to be a deterrent. We ask the questions and record what the students provide us. We ask them what happened, we ask them what they were thinking, we ask them what they've been thinking about while they were waiting to be processed with. We ask them to identify who's been impacted by their decision, and then we talk about what the plan looks like to return to class, ultimately trying to get to what other things do you need to feel successful, right? It's not, well, you sat here for an hour, you're clearly ready to go learn again, right? We want them to address what they need. Is it, again, a breakdown of relationship? Is it, I didn't get to eat, I need a snack, I need water, my mom, I need to call her because I'm not sure if I'm going to basketball practice, or is it something greater? What that also leads to, that's not on that form, but we'll do a lot of what we call restorative conferences with students. So we'll actually sit 2 students down and allow them to hear each other's opinion on a situation and work through an issue together as well. Once again, trying to create a permanent change rather than just saying don't do that behavior because I say so. And then the final component, and we're going to go backwards there, Julie, just real quick, is the universal coaching. So myself and 2 other members of my team are trying to get out as often as possible and be in the moment with adults, right? Behavior coaching is really complicated. It's hard to bring up at a meeting and say, let's enact this behavior and replicate it. Adults, fortunately, even when they're trying to be naughty, don't do it the same way kids do. So it's really helpful for us to be in the moment with teachers, identifying spaces where kids are struggling and trying to be there and saying, I recommend you try this and do this, and kind of work them through that process in the hope of giving them the tools to be able to do it once we're not there.
In parens, I know what NCSS is, what is the SB? Is that some schools?
School-based behavior clinician is just within the NCS
Is
organization,
that
so.
a contracted service?
It is a contracted service, yeah. And they kind of take on our higher tier students when we've reached a point where I identify that what they need is something beyond a basic intervention. They'll write a specific behavior plan that identifies the function of their behavior, what is causing this. And then we create a motivator within that to say to the student, we want you to change this and here's how you can do it. We have specific plans that are written for kids to provide them that really detailed intervention, much like these ladies over here do, where you're working one-on-one with someone to say this is really what you're working on.
How much parent contact would you have in that process?
In which process?
When the student gets to the point where you're doing NCSS, you're trying to close the loop?
A ton. I mean, in general, anything that happens in the major form, I make a personal call home. I pick up the phone and I call a family and I discuss what the behavior was, what came out of it, I have that personal conversation. When we're reaching that, it's fully onto, we cannot choose to have someone become a member or work with NCSS. We can offer it and they have to choose to sign on. We do kind of have a middle level, which is a modified plan that's similar to what NCSS uses, that comes from the school, but I would never put a student on that without conferring with the parents first. It's been the admin edict from the beginning that we need parents to be engaged fully in this process, so I don't just levy out discipline wildly because I'm in a, I make sure every parent is part of that process with us and we work together on it. We have a behavior matrix that we send to our parents as well, so not only do they get a call from me, but they also receive a letter that just says this happened, here's when you were contacted, and here's kind of where they fall in that matrix as well. It is probably the biggest part of my job is making those calls. I try to make every single call myself unless I'm not physically present in the building, so that I'm also building relationships. So when we do need those higher interventions, it's coming from me and I'm walking them through why we think that's the proper intervention.
So are you part of the guidance team too, or are they separate?
Not officially, they have their own role, but we work significantly close together. I do help coordinate the mental health services, so I won't do any of the actual work, but I'll kind of help identify who might need to be on that list and help find the right provider to work with them based on the data that we have, so.
Thank you.
Sure.
is the last one, we kind of already talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of hit this, but I think that really is the biggest change from the years for me in my short time here is really just the pandemic pulled people apart and created separation, and we're trying to reunite and bring people back together. Families are so instrumental in the true change of behavior and recognizing what goes on. And when students find that we're on the same page as home, and I can be like, what happens when I make a call home today? And students can be like, well, and I can be like, so this goes this way or this way, right? I can use that as an advantage. I can also build relationships with families to help them find other resources when we reach that level. I take a personal philosophy of always believing the best in kids and wanting them to be successful, and so when I talk to parents, even on their kids, a day where a kid struggles, I try to find that one shining nugget and say, but there's this opening here, and help me exploit it, help me make it grow, help me make it bigger. Because it is, you know, I have 2 little kids at home, and I have my moments for sure, so I'm always thankful for staff and people at school that do that other work, and so I hope people feel we do the same in the reach out capacity of, yes, discipline's necessary, and yes, we want them to have the best environment, but ultimately we want them to be the best people, not only academically, but socially as well. So if anything we can do at this level to prepare them for that, we certainly want to do.
Julie, is this an ESSER funded position?
No, we added this position instead of an assistant principal.
Okay. I was hoping it wasn't.
Thanks for that.
I got a couple questions.
Okay, go ahead, Ty. Well, actually, let me open up to the board first.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Any board members have questions or comments on the presentation? Well, let me ask you first, Yeshua, are you guys done with your presentation?
No.
No,
No, okay.
So I was asked to do the outdoor classrooms, we did
Alright.
that as the last section.
May I ask the math consultant question?
Let's,
Okay.
so are we ready to move on to the outdoor classroom part?
Yes, that was the
Alright, so
final.
let's do some questions on introduction
Okay, that's
pieces.
fine.
Go ahead, Don.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought you said you were going to go on there. Okay, you were talking about the students, and I wondered, what percentage of students move to, say, adequate performance within, say, the first 3 months of the school year?
So I'll answer that question with a personal philosophy first. I really first look at growth as far as where they've started and where they came to, because that's kind of the priority.
It's an age-old
for me.
response.
Yep.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Second part, we do have some that were able to move through and become proficient. I think a lot of times it tends to be kids that are wavering. You know, you can have a wicked good grasp of geometry and then really struggle with calculation. So there's like this conceptual side and then there's this calculation side, and balancing the work on that is a little bit of a challenge. I'm not sure that I have accurate enough data to tell you how many kids are moving from intervention to a proficient level, primarily because I interpret intervention at 5 different levels. You know, the classroom teacher is an interventionist because they're intervening at a classroom level.
So at the end of the year, can you identify students who have moved from needing assistance to, as they move to next grade?
I can identify kids that have cycled in and out of intervention periodically throughout the year.
and then we have the school-wide and grade level data where you can see with STAR 3 times a year how students are performing overall in math.
I would hope some of them live all 6 years in
Yeah.
intervention, but
Yep.
probably happens.
Yep, it's interesting, it's actually one of the things that our MTSS audit sort of brought up for a while, is being able to actually accurately progress monitor how much our intervention system is having an impact. And it's a work in progress, and it's something that we're sort of looking at. There's a bunch of different avenues that we could take. One of it is actually using STAR sort of as a baseline, and because we use that 3 times a year, we could see a snapshot 3 times a year, but it's one data point.
Toby?
So my question is on STAR, how you mentioned that the test is smart, meaning if you get it right, it'll ask you a harder
Adjusts,
question.
yeah.
So those questions are from a national STAR? Like you don't have
National.
control of those questions?
Correct. You can
And
actually
they're
give
the
it-
same questions Franklin and Swanton kids are seeing?
So they have a bank of questions
Yep.
that they pull from, right? We could actually give the STAR every week throughout the
Right.
school year, and the kids would never get the same same question.
Right, so like,
So,
We haven't tried that.
yeah, no,
what I'm kinda curious though is, so that says stars used nationwide?
yes.
So we're knowing how our kids are ranking nationwide?
So not every school uses
Right,
STAR, right? They
right.
may use a different universal
Right,
screener.
right.
We've chosen this one, but it is nationally normed.
So we kinda have a good idea, so when we're saying if they're at a level, it's not a level just established by within our school.
Correct.
Exactly,
It's,
correct.
it's a bigger, whole competitive worldwide.
Right,
Yes.
typically fifth grader, if we're looking
We're
at
not
fifth
staying in our
grader.
own bubble, right, okay.
Right, so we're looking at fifth graders across the United States.
Okay.
Yeah, that take a start.
And Julie, all of MVSD uses that.
Yes.
Here.
I have a statement that, just that you reminded me, so that, I went to a funeral this weekend, a local, person that passed away, and, he was a farmer in town, and he retired some years ago. And, one of the things that he did in retirement to stay busy was, became a bus driver, and he was busing troubled students' behavioral problems. And in the obituary, they talked about how he always talked to them. And they said it must be tough to, deal with troubled kids, and he said, there's no bad kids, they just need somebody to talk to. And that's kind of what I got from what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, that's as poetic as you can probably say, and I think a lot of the struggles with behavior is getting to understand the circumstances you're dealing with. It's very easy to set kind of, I want you to do this, but some of these young people have challenges I can't even fathom. Like, I hear it and I can recognize what they're saying to me, but the idea of walking in their shoes is not even humanly possible for me, because it's just not anything I've experienced to be able to say, that happened to me once. Like, sometimes I can, and often a lot of times, just the process of talking and seeing someone receptive to it, even when they're in trouble, to say, even though I'm upset with your choice, there's a greater thing we're gonna do here, and we'll talk about the choice, but let's talk about you a little bit and make sure. And I have to give kudos. I'm lucky enough to have a group of people to support me in that work, and that's why it works, because I don't have to just move a kid along in order to accomplish a goal. If I need 45 minutes with a kid, my team backs me up so the school operations continue to happen, and I can spend that time. And so when I call a parent, I'm not just saying, so Johnny got in trouble today. I'm saying, here's the conversation we had, here's what came up, here's what they mentioned, here's what we talked about. I'm giving that level of detail. So I'm giving them a much bigger snapshot into what they're expressing. And sometimes I'm revealing information to parents they don't even know, because the kids haven't shared it with the families because of expectations or rules. And so that's why that collaboration is so important, because sometimes I am the conduit to a bigger change through that conversation.
So, yeah, Brennick. Yeah.
So for math and English, you're doing these interventions from K all the way to 6th grade,
Yes.
and what's the reception from the students, and does it vary depending on the groups? Are they more receptive to get older, are they less, because there has to be some challenges there, so what are those challenges?
As far as actually the intervention, being provided intervention,
Well,
or
from,
the response?
the reception from the students.
It varies from student to student. I mean, in general, I think all kids want to succeed. So they all want to be kind of demonstrating being proficient, and they generally want to know what they're doing, and if they don't feel comfortable and don't know what they're doing, then that's when we sort of see a response that is less pleasant. But when they have the opportunity to take something from an intervention session and apply it to class, like the light bulb goes on. They're like, oh yeah, I did that with so-and-so, which is typically what we hear. I'd rather hear them say, I used that model to do this, but it's typically, I did that with so-and-so, and now I can use it here. So I think having the skills to be able to succeed in the classroom level is definitely a bonus. Older kids recognize it more than younger kids.
But I think we're seeing a little less of that now, because our classroom teachers are also intervening in the classroom. So they're pulling small groups to the back table, and then they're intervening on skills that kids, so they're seeing that all kids are getting some sort of intervention. So I think we see less and less of that stigma about having to work with a teacher in a small group or individually. I feel like we see a little bit less of that.
There's also been a pretty conscious effort as far as rotating staff.
Yes.
Too, like, you know, like we might have certain staff that specify in a certain area, but if we're gonna work with this teacher this week, you may work with this teacher that week, you may work with this teacher, you may work with this adult another week, so it does sort of level the playing field.
How many interventionists do you have in Highgate?
There.
4.
So Dawn, that was actually my first question to you, Yeshua. How does the resourcing of this program compare with the need of the students here?
As in, like, the current staff we have?
Currently, yes.
Everyone's busy. I wouldn't say we have way more students, although I would argue mental health wise, we have a lot of student needs that we can't always meet. But I think we have a really good system. And I think we also have the time to meet as interventionists, which is really important. So I have been in some systems where there is no time but to be providing services, which means if they're not making progress, they don't have time to talk about that and collaborate with people. So I think we also have some that we have the option to push in or pull out too. So basically, people's schedule doesn't have to always be, I only can pull out kids because I can get them out of the environment, because some kids, we need the intervention in the classroom. That way they'll transfer those skills more.
And then if the intervention program is successful, what should we see as we get to the end of the year and we start looking at data points again? What would be the expectation, what we'd see in a successful year?
Yeah, so ultimately, like we were just talking about this earlier, ultimately, we wanna work ourselves out of our jobs, right? So we wanna get to a point where no kid needs intervention, that we're providing everything they need, they're successful, they're at grade level. That's the best case scenario, that's not always how things work, I mean, unfortunately. But that ultimately is our goal.
So that might not be
Really,
the best
kid-
answer with our budget conversation.
Well, I'd like.
But we're not there yet. Let's remember that.
So, you know, we have our district goals where we're trying to improve proficiency by 5%, right?
Right.
So that's kind of high level. So
Yeah.
what, I guess, you know, we saw a few data points here. If we looked at these same numbers again in April or May, how would we know if it's been a good year or not a good year? What would we expect to see up there for either the behavioral reports or the distribution of the reds and yellows and blues and
I was
greens?
gonna say, so, you know, you look at 5% on a grade level and it's 1, 2, 3 kids, so we wanna see that change as far as 1, 2, 3 kids. I'll take 10, but I mean, 1, 2, and 3 would be what we visually see as a change, and that's moving the bar.
How many years have we had interventionists in Highgate?
Edna, how long do you think? You're the
Before
veteran.
I was here.
everybody on that one.
Yeah, so
Before
long
I
history.
was here.
And
More than 10 years then?
Oh, yes.
More than 20?
Yes.
See, I came on the school board in Swanton about 22 years ago, and I don't remember having interventionists 22 years ago.
So back then, we called them Title I teachers, do you remember? So
Title
like when we-
I math and Title I reading.
Yes, so that's what our interventionists are. Yep, yeah, same thing, new name.
From a behavior standpoint, I would actually look at another piece of data that's not represented up there, but we can see the average number of majors or minors that we have in a day. So ultimately, if our interventions keep warning, I would be looking at, do we see a significant drop in the number of majors per day? That's really what we wanna see. There's no real ever plan to eliminate minor behavior because students learn through their actions and they always have to do that. But what we would wanna see is, do these interventions we keep coming up earlier and earlier limit the number of major events? And there's always gonna be major events because children throughout the course of their thing are gonna be challenged with something they've never faced before and not know how to respond to it, which is going to lead to a behavior. But if I saw, you know, there's times in the past where we've had, 9 or 10 or 11 major events in a day, that feels like a lot, right? And so if I'm at 3 or 4 a day, or maybe at some point 1 or 2 a day, that would be ideal. And there are days when there are none. Like today, I don't think we had a single one. and then there are days when there's, you know, multiple. So that would be more my data to look at, because it's, to me, it's not the number of events, it's how many per day, and the more we're intervening, hopefully we decrease. So if I had 500,000 minors, but only 6 majors, I would be a thrilled human being, right? Because those little things are correctable and catchable, and so I don't care how many of those we have, because it means we had more opportunities to communicate. It's those big behaviors where, okay, something big happened, and why did we miss it? What didn't we do to intervene? And there are just some things you can't foresee, but the less of those we have, the more that number decreases, the more I think we're moving in the right direction, so.
I like your attitude on that, as you were talking to me, going back about 50 years ago with interacting with teachers who had children misbehave, and as a principal say, those are the minors that you call, I call learning experiences. You know, Peter fouled up today, but he's gonna learn something from that, and I bet I won't see him again for a month or two. And, I mean, there's no perfect child.
Nope.
But sometimes you learn a little bit from a school of hard knocks or an experience that.
Sure do.
So I like the approach here.
Thank you.
Well, I think with all of our interventions too, our kids move in and out, and that's actually what we wanna see. Is we have a kid who maybe was in intervention for this, they're now out of it, but then the unit changed, now they're intervening in something different. And so I think it's hard to say actually, when do you feel you have found success? And I think even behaviorally, Timmy, we might have seen him every single day, and all of a sudden we've not seen Timmy for 2 weeks. But man, Susie has filled in that gap. You know, so I think especially with behavior, it's really hard because it's individual success for me with behavior. It's those kids that it's like, wow, I haven't seen you. Let's have lunch, just chat about how things are going. But intervention, I think, for academically, it's just they're going to be moving in and out.
Well, I think to both of your points, I think the best illustration of that is, you know, a kid who will struggle with the way they communicate. I'm thinking of a student who struggled significantly last year, and a lot of interventions were put into place, and he came to find Yeshua and I the other day to share something that was happening to him, and gave complete trust to us to deal with it, right? Instead of taking it into his own hands. Like, he's still struggling, but he came in the office all comfortable before. He didn't want to see me, he knew what was coming. Now he walks in, I need to tell you what happened, and goes into his spiel about what's bothering him. Like, thanks, I'll have a great day now. You know, I mean, that's the real change, that's the real intervention applying. Does that kid still make mistakes on the regular? Of course he does, right? But to have a student who was so resistant to our presence and so intimidated is not the right word, but so off-put by adults, you're, you know, I don't want to talk to you, you don't care about me, you're just here to come to that level where they can come and share the other experience they're having and acknowledge that they need help and support. That's truly when I feel like I've done what I'm here to do, so.
Are there any overall trends in terms of like what you're seeing? Because like probably last year and this year, even though maybe the number was similar, got to be very different years.
Yeah, I think the one constant I've seen that I have concerns about is physical aggression. The number of students who use hands-on response to issues, right? I don't know where it's coming from. We have some sense of kids resorting to that more simple expression of emotion because it's there, but it is a weird one because you'll talk to students and they can acknowledge and tell you they know they're not supposed to, but it seems to be the default that they go to. I won't climb on my soapbox now and give you my personal opinion about why that happens, but it is the one that is the most concerning, just given the culture we live in and the world we live in. I want to make sure our young people understand that physical retaliation is never going to solve anything. And it happens younger and younger and is more and more common. From my previous years of work, I'm seeing more prevalence of it now than I have in the past. So I think that's the one, I think that the trend that I would probably be most concerned about. I think our data overall has been similar with majors and minors outside of that one. As we're recording more minors, we're recognizing that there's more prevalence of things we may not have accounted for. So I think that's the other big change from the years past, is we're recognizing like, oh wow, this is happening a lot in this trend, and now I can see why this kid at some point gets to this higher level and doesn't. Because what we find out is, often there's a relationship breakdown, and so by the time they reach those second or third or fourth major and we're getting into advanced discipline, they're telling you about things that weren't dealt with in September and October and November, which have degraded the relationship and sometimes even broken trust with the adult who's in charge, and so it stops being like, I'm willing to work with you to, I'm not gonna listen to you to, I'm done with you, and so now I'm putting up that wall. And that is why that minor data is so important, because sometimes there's the answer's right in front of me. I've got to get that adult in this dispute to connect somehow and find something positive to build off of. Because it's kids take it personal. Like, I hate to say it that way, but they feel that like that adult in front of them has a great value, and if it's not feeling good for them, it can very quickly de-escalate in negative direction. So that's why that minor dating being through the roof is wonderful, because that means we're looking at it and analyzing that. My team, every week when we meet on Thursdays, we actually pull up all that data and we look at the kids who are getting that data and making sure are there interventions in place, and if there's not, we find out why, and then we go try to put something into place for those students. So like, if I pulled up the top like 15 kids, I would say 14 out of the 15 have an already established intervention. And the 15th one, I'm talking to the parents regularly to try to get the next intervention in place.
All right, I'm gonna turn over to Ty. Do you have something to
Real quick, how many years have you been in this role at Highgate?
So this is my second year in this particular role here, but I've been in education for, this is year 19.
And I guess it's a bigger issue than that's gonna be solved tonight, but what support do you get when you come across a situation that may need New Z or DCF from those agencies? Is Highgate getting the support that they need?
It's a really hard question to answer because it's so specific to the family situation. So like in a situation with DCF, they always accept my call, they take the information. How they choose to move forward in my observation and working with them depends on precursor data that exists, their lack thereof, or within. I feel good about my personal working relationship with our contract with NCSS. They're very responsive. I have very good support from there. Those are really the two agencies I mostly deal with. We are trying to build our relationship, to your point, Rennie, with the bus company of trying to put in other interventions. I would be more than happy to talk more about that. I feel very caught in the middle sometimes of that one, of trying to support what we believe philosophically around the bus and supporting an outside company and what their expectations are and how to support both sides of that. But again, I'll table that for
But I also think overall, I've never felt like we don't have something we need.
Correct.
Like, I've never felt that I need more support. Or a lot of times I'll go to Julie,
Yep.
and then she'll be a great resource. DCF too, a lot of times it's outside the school day. We handle inside the school day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then on the educational intervention, do you find any circumstances where the child may need a different assessment that isn't able to happen in the building, but we're hesitant to recommend that assessment because of it, whether budgeting or job security or I don't know how to, dyslexia, for example.
So I do know in the past, we have sent students out to the Stern Center for assessment, or to be assessed. They're able to do something that we're not able to do in the classroom, and so we have reached out to other agencies.
In years past, why I asked the question, in years past, it's been delayed. You know, I don't think we're at that point yet. And I just didn't know if things have changed in recent years.
I mean, just mindset-wise right now, there's a lot of focus and current research on doing this timely intervention idea. So this turnaround time, you know, even sometimes in math world, 8 weeks is a long time. That's like several units of study, and we've missed an opportunity if we get to that point and just respond what the end unit was. You know, this is why we really want to break it down to these short segments so that we can A, track data to see if things are changing or if something needs to change, and B, track progress to see how the student's kind of going. It's a little bit new,
so I don't have a good track record necessarily to respond to, but we're responding to the fact that we didn't have something before necessarily, so.
Do we still use the services of agencies like the Stern Center?
Not recently, but yes.
We haven't, we do, we do contract with them. I do know, we reach out to them, they've done some training with our school, we've
I've
done
heard
some
that,
mind
right,
play
but I
training.
didn't know about students.
We've had some tutoring where, during, shortly after, 2 years ago, I think it was, when we all came back, we had some online tutoring that we had with Stern Center, teachers. So, yeah, we still have contact
I
with
know
them.
a portion that has kind of fallen in and out of favor of some school districts.
If any individual family that feels that they need an additional evaluation, they just need to request that and the team will discuss it with them.
I think this has been a great conversation. Yesh, I think I'm gonna turn back over to you now to
Great.
wrap up the presentation.
Yes. So we'll talk about the outdoor classroom. So I'm just gonna try to give you some more information that's been requested on why we're thinking about going in that direction. So I just wanted to open up with a quote from Harvard School of Education. It talks about research has shown that outdoor learning can have huge benefits on student mental health and academic performance. They're often calmer, better able to focus when learning in nature, and teachers have reported better behavior and social interactions with fewer disciplinary issues. The big thing I wanted to make sure is that I want to make sure it's clear. It's not Mr. Pastino wants an outdoor classroom, give it to me now. This came from our recovery plan, our recovery district team. And it was thought up to come up with an outdoor classroom for both Franklin and Highgate. I think as a Franklin's project, currently, they have gone away from obviously focusing on an outdoor classroom. But that is the MVSD recovery plan, and so if you actually click on the top, it does link to it, but Julie, you don't have to necessarily go there now. But I just marked the 2 locations in the recovery plan that connects to the outdoor classroom. So under engagement and truancy on page 12, it talks about our continued work with Kurt Valenta, which you probably know Highgate actually works quite a bit with Kurt. We have a great relationship with him. And we also work on project-based learning, which, as you know, our art teacher is 20% of that. And so our idea was having building-based initiatives that would then connect with an outdoor classroom. So obviously a lot of hands-on learning, project-based learning can happen in an outdoor classroom. And then on page 24, we talk about that funding, and the team recommended that we use some of our funding to create outdoor classrooms and to support PBL and PLP opportunities. Go ahead. And then I just kind of had a few points to make as to why I'm very hopeful for an outdoor classroom. So we definitely have revamped, or not revamped, sorry, we've almost had like a renewed focus on our science curriculum. And actually Michelle in the back has been our representative from Highgate on that. And so with an outdoor classroom, a lot of the science that we've kind of revamped, that can be happening outdoors, either with it being led by the teacher or with Kurt Valenta being here as a resource. And then our number 2 and the big one is just that hands-on experiential learning. If you ever get the opportunity to have Kurt Valenta just take you on a walk, it is incredible what you learn. And I was very fortunate that I actually had someone out, and so I had to take a student with Kurt, and the amount of dialogue that he has about nature and asking questions, and the student was way more knowledgeable than I was on the walk. But I just think an outdoor classroom can just enhance that, because you can be doing that often with larger groups. And for 3, as I kind of already gave it away, but just our continued work with Kurt as well as with our project-based learning. So our grades 4 through 6 have an explorations block where they really focus on project-based learning with the help of our art teacher. And really the big thing for me is I almost didn't want to call it an outdoor classroom, but it's almost like an outdoor space. We even talked about literally having the classroom set up in a way that it's towards the center of town, so that it's on school property, but it's really a community resource that I think Kurt would be really excited about. And we have different groups in town that I think would also use it, so folks like the library rec, they probably would often use it. So I really want to see it more just as an outdoor classroom, but as a community resource.
So you don't have an outdoor classroom yet?
No.
It's in the ARPESER plan.
Right.
And the facilities committee has seen, the first draft. We have to go out to bid. There's a whole process.
I just wanna say, I love that idea, and I think that is, yeah, I
great that you're thinking about building it into the bigger community project here in Highgate. I think that's a really important thing to do and it'd be really well received. So.
I think so too.
Good
Are
for
there
on that.
concepts or ideas for that you can find or schematic so far, or it's still in the infancy phase?
Too early.
Yeah, it's a little too early. There's a picture that I can give you. It's what we're hoping for.
That was my question. I was like, I gotta see what this looks like, so I Googled it.
Yeah, I do have what I want to say it was
So-
last board report. I did put a picture, but I can definitely actually put that picture when I email about the Google form. I could throw that picture back in.
Yeah, I'm just kinda curious which
You know,
scenario.
photos
here you
worth
wanna
1,000
choose.
words, but just grab yourself a little bit of hot water
Yeah.
and get this photo out.
And then that would be what
Yeah,
I
ours
was
is
thinking would be
closer to this
It's
style, but not
It's in the plan.
round in
Yeah.
nature. It was a little more oval shape, so it's kind of a three-sided, like front open
Right,
and then
so
around.
it'd be a one-time use.
That's what that's picture. I don't know.
I know,
That
right?
looks like a playground.
All right.
Devin, you had a hand up on the screen.
Oh. The board members. Joanne.
It's okay. It's what I get for being remote. So I also want to say, I also think the outdoor classroom is a great idea. As I sit here, listening to all the different discussions that have happened, I want to continue and think, we're a whole district. So yes, the Highgate classroom, we can call it that, or I'm sure the students will choose a name to call it, or maybe you guys will vote on what this area, this public area will be called. But in my mind, I see it as a fun space to learn that hopefully not just the Highgate kids can benefit from, but hopefully the Franklin and the Swan Elementary students can benefit from it also. We're hearing about, positive behavior from the Swan School, and maybe this would be a way for, the classroom to be able to take a field trip, or say, hey, on this particular date, we've reserved, the Highgate public, classroom, district room, I don't know, outdoor district room to be able to hold our, class in. So it's just a thought. I'm not sure, obviously how the whole district would see that, but I think it's a great idea, Yashua. So I'm happy and I hope it is able to move forward.
Great, thank you. All right, any final thoughts for Yeshua and the Highgate team? None. Thank you all. This was
Yes,
very
thank you.
good conversation.
Terry has her hand up.
Terry has her hand up. Oh boy, missed another one.
What?
Terry,
I just missed that. I just wanted to, sorry, brain fog here. I just wanted to reinforce what Joanne said. I think it's a great idea. And also, I think, the facilities committee, you all have probably talked about this in terms of as we start to be maybe hard on space or lacking space somewhere, wouldn't it be awesome if we had these outdoor classrooms for a variety of reasons? As we're getting warmer and warmer, there's more time during the year that kids could use them. And I'd be very curious too about this project-based learning that I think you said something like 20% or something. You talked about the older. I would love it if we could have that on a future agenda item too, as we talk about how all the different buildings are going towards that. I imagine that'd be kosher, but it would be interesting to hear how people are doing. So thank you. That was great. I really enjoyed that whole presentation. Thank you.
thanks, Terry. Thanks, Terry. I've jotted down that agenda item to take a look at. So, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, we're resituated here. So next, Julie, I'll turn it over to you. We'll do the community input survey results related to the budget for FY '24.
And I will put these in the drive, or anybody who wants them, they are linked to the agenda, so you can look at it as we go along. And I'm gonna share again, so I'm gonna be able to see Terry and Laura and Joanne. So sent out 2 surveys. We sent them out early, well before Thanksgiving, that sort of middle week in Thanksgiving. We talked previously about the timing, and we looked at the draft at previous meeting. And we wanted to make sure that we were getting community input from parents and community members, but I also traditionally get good input from teachers, so I created a separate survey for them so that they weren't mingling. JR, I think you all had an opportunity to see it. He sent out a great promotional video. People loved the video. That went out to all families. It was on the website. We had all the town clerks. We asked the town municipalities to send them out in their email list. A couple of them did. And so we saw much more input from communities that were non-parents. So the first thing we did was we asked that question, what's your primary relationship to the school? And here was the community one. So this orange here, 25.8%, was residents that don't have kids in school. And then we have middle, high school families, and then elementary families. And then, of course, with these surveys, there's an other, and you can put in whatever you want. So you have a lot of people just stating what they consider their relationship to be in the school. And here's the teacher, because I wanted to get a sense of, are you an employee of the district and you live in the community? About a third, just under a third of our employees also live here. So this was the first question, the overall heading, that the district has made investments in many priority areas, such as employee wages and benefits, building infrastructure, technology, transportation, and extracurricular activity. And while the board is establishing its funding priorities, we would like your input as to where MVSD can make further investments. So I'm going to go through them all. Stop me when you have a question. The first, and I always have at the top, I have the community survey, and on the bottom I have the employees. So here's a good example. 100% of the staff think that it's essential or important to pay competitive wages. I don't think that's a surprise.
When you say staff, that includes non-teachers?
Yes, that's all employees.
Okay.
And then up here on the community though, it's not really that different. You have something like 97% were saying that paying our teachers and our support staff competitive wages is a priority. And that was the highest number of agreement throughout the whole survey. And the board has heard that in previous years and has made decisions about that, but it's an important thing to point out. Curriculum investments and instructional services to improve student and academic outcomes, purchasing programs, professional development, anything we do to improve instruction and outcomes. I think you can see the blue is essential, the red is important. You can really see that both our employees and our community really find that to be important. Enhanced services to support students with social and behavioral needs, as we've been talking about in our budgeting, one of the outside of instructional salaries, benefits, etc., one of the largest parts of the budget are either employees that we pay to support students with social and emotional needs, contracts, services, transportation, all related to that. So you can see that a large number of people see it as essential and important. And I'm not surprised that people working in the school see it as more essential because they see it. They see what kids need. Greater coordination and expansion of elementary school athletics, something we've been talking about a lot, how to coordinate that, how to develop. Good to have was the largest category in both, pretty similar between employees and the community. About 15% found it essential, 21% important. I think we all agree that we know that that is important for our kids. Support for tech ed, student apprenticeships, work readiness. I was at a CTE meeting at the state level just today, talking about the importance of occur in technical education. Very clear that the community, more than half think it's essential. And then almost 40% on top of that find it important. So it's a very important thing that we do.
That one's quite different than the staff response.
I know, it's interesting. More of them are in the it's important category.
Right.
You know, nobody says it's not important.
Well, I think that would reflect we don't have a tech program.
Of our own.
Right.
I think also if you're a sixth grade teacher, you may not have as much understanding of what opportunities there are, and that's some work that we're trying to do in our region. It's actually broaden the understanding, even at the elementary level, of what opportunities, what career opportunities we should be preparing kids for, and even just exposing them to, even at young grade levels. After school programming, parents and school, it's really, as far as essential, there's not that much of a difference. I think there's 21% and 43% that in the community that say it's essential and important. For those families, it is essential and important. And I think you see the staff see even more there because they see how students respond and grow when they have those opportunities. Student transportation, I always ask that, even though nobody's having conversations about not having student transportation. It's just one of the most expensive things we do. You can see that the community relies on it and finds it to be essential. Capital investments to improve and maintain safe and healthy school facilities. We do a lot of talking about this. I think it's something that the board has responded well to, and I think it's one thing that the community has responded well to, the fact that the board is making investments in the schools. 50% say it's essential and 40% say it's important. That's a pretty strong message.
That's really good to see with the direction that we're trying to go.
Absolutely.
I'm really surprised by the staff response to that.
Yeah, it's more in the 80% range for staff.
Just real quick, just to go back, maintaining the transportation services, I mean, it's interesting that it's really looked at as essential.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like to harp on it, but I do think that, especially with the new using of the company that we have, that we do get a clear idea of how that's going. Because, you know, considering the money that we're paying for this, and it's also a service that is provided, right? It's not something that we have to do. I think getting some sort of like just real comprehensive feedback on how that's going across the district, I think is important. Because I know at some point, before we know it, we're renegotiating another contract. So we need to have, I think, good data on how that's going, both financially, and the cost meeting what we expect, but also in terms of like, you know, students and parents and stuff like that. Because I think that's one of those issues that seems to jump right in the community's mind when they think of us. So I just wanted to
I'm kind of curious too. I would be interested in if people would think it's as essential for high school age kids. Meaning, I could see a lot of people thinking that transportation is more essential for the younger children. I don't know. That's just a theory. If we're going out to try to do a deeper dive on just transportation, I would kind of be interested to see if we could see that. And the thing that concerns me the most with transportation is, and I was going to ask Laura when we get to budget, the line item for that, because what bothers me has nothing to do with, I think it's an important service, but when we're in a competitive high school environment, which we are, because there is choice, there are some schools that don't have to budget what we budget for transportation, and they can use that money for things that we're spending on transportation, which makes their school appear more attractive. So I just think that that's that's kind of where I'm interested in the transportation. Like I just think that should be funded differently, because I think it puts us at a disadvantage in some respects.
I think some of those are real interesting thoughts. We are locked into a 3-year contract.
Right, yeah, right.
The time to dig into those
Yeah.
would be 2
Right.
years from now, where we have a year of lead time to actually do
Right.
some of that research, so. Whoever's on the board in 2 years, write it down.
Yeah.
I think the thing on that topic though, Toby, is there really needs to be a more rural voice. And I think it occurs in the legislature, because I don't know how the transportation is, we get some type of reimbursements from transportation, right?
Laura?
Laura?
We do.
Maybe it's what-
Not much.
What impact from the state is money for transportation? Do we get it for technical career education? The miles we travel,
That's another.
There's just a straight transportation reimbursement. I don't know the calculation off the top of my head. It's something that AOE does, but I can get that for you.
and I'm not sure I want it.
It's fairly consistent from year to year.
But I think to increase the state allocation in the general fund or the ed fund for transportation would be a factor.
Just to equalize
Right.
that throughout the state, rather than, we might be able to offer Mandarin if we didn't have to have so much busing. I just, there's all sorts of things
That's
you
a
could
good
do.
point.
That's a good point. Yeah. That's a big ticket item.
So this is one to put on our list for potential VSBA resolutions for next time around, I think.
I personally don't see it as anything to do with the contract. We have a contract, but to get the state to be a better partner is what I'm looking at.
We're always trying to compare ourselves, but it's not really when you're apples and apples.
I do think it ties in with the fact that if a lot of people are looking at like essential, I think also understanding that it's a privilege, and I think that does correlate to behaviors that are acceptable or not acceptable in something that's a privilege.
We were told that all through grade school.
So, kids who can walk to school 10 miles do that. So,
Yeah, mine goes from across the street to here on a bus.
In the interest of time, we'll let Julie continue on.
Well, this is the last of the regular survey questions, and Toby had asked for this one to be added. I thought it was a good one to add, talking about capital investments to improve athletic fields and facilities. And we saw a number of people think it's important.
But again, staff, way down compared to the community.
Right. It's not surprising. Good to have.
Let's
It
bring
falls
up-
in the good to have category. If the community had at least, 36% thought it was important and 17% think it's essential.
It's still a major way in which our community interacts with our school.
Yes.
So staff is interacting with the school all the time
In a different way,
in
yeah.
a different way, so,
Yeah.
That's
That's why I like doing the two different surveys, because
interesting
you
to
really
see.
get
Yeah.
But
perspective.
the whole idea, the athletic field, the whole building thing, when I looked at that, it's like, what? The building's not, but maybe it's in, I don't know, but maybe it's in the minds of the people who work there, that's a given, that's an expectation. We're gonna have the best possible building, so why worry about it? But after all the work we've been trying to do, you see that, kind of nonchalant about it.
Just so that we have this data, when we're planning and reaching out, we have some good information about how the community interacts and gets information from school. Email directly from the school district was the largest, followed by newsletters or notices from the school Facebook page and the district Facebook page, the website, and then conversations with friends and neighbors, I think, was one of the smaller ones. Some of the others were less important, but you can really see that both that direct newsletter report out as well as the social media and website are the biggest places.
Is that involving Seesaw, is that,
All of that would be
Okay, yeah.
really in there.
I didn't see it specifically listed there.
No, it wasn't, because each school has something
Oh,
different,
true, okay,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And the last one, what motivates you to vote on district issues? It's nice to see 78% reporting that they're motivated by providing students with a quality education. And 15% motivated as involved citizens to exercise their right to vote. And really only a small number, but just stating it's about taxes for them. So I find that, I very much believe that about our community.
It's a really good job. I like this.
We need to get that 78% to vote.
Yes.
So I do think we reached more non-parent community members, and I think I pointed out the things that were the highlights there about a third of our employees being MVSD community residents, and you saw what the biggest areas of agreement and priority were. And I don't think they're a surprise, but I think it's really important to engage the community and get their input, and I think we got more this time than last, and I really think the communities that were able to help us push that out, and we get a lot of hits and a lot of interest on that video that we put up on the website. It really explained why we want that input, so.
Is this anywhere?
Not yet. I'd be happy to put it, it's linked in the agenda, so
Right.
it'll be linked there.
There's not, it could be shared.
Yeah, I think it would be a great thing to put up so then people are seeing.
Right, I'd like to send, point some people individually to it. So if you could put it up, if you can email us when it's up on, somewhere,
Absolutely.
that would be helpful.
Newspapers don't rank very well, do they?
Yeah.
Very fruity.
Alright, I think the Courier is bigger than the Messenger anymore.
Went to buy a newspaper, it was like $6. I'm like, wow.
It needs 4 pages.
Alright, so, having seen that, Ty, you have a brief question on that survey results?
Yeah, so a question about seeing how most people, the biggest response was through direct emails. When a kid graduates out, do the parents automatically get kicked off the email?
Oh, yeah, that's, once they leave, we don't have we don't have a reason to be contacting families in terms of, you know.
Is there a database they can go to for things like this? So it's like a blast email, that those names can automatically get entered into?
I think that's an interesting point to think about the way a town maintains a contact list. Is the school able to maintain a contact list? I don't know the answer to that, but certainly could be beneficial down the road.
Right, we have it for, you know, enrolled peoples and in emergencies, et cetera, but it would be interesting to see if there's a way to compile contact information.
And then
Making a note, Todd.
the second thing is, I think seeing the discrepancies from staff responses to the public, I really think the staff should be shown that at their staff meetings at all the schools to, so they know what where the community stands on a lot of things.
Yeah, I think those differences can be interesting because sometimes it's a difference in perspective between the two groups, and a lot of times it really just takes a coming together of an understanding. You know, one maybe sees it in a different way, understands it. Having that cross communication is probably, you know, the solution. So I think we can take that back and maybe build some of that into future marketing information too, where we see the staff dealing with something that they feel the community's not fully understanding, and then likewise having the staff understand where the community sits on some of these things. All right, with that, Terry has her hand up again. Oh, Terry? Go ahead.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I wanted to chime in because I've said before that we're not really reaching anybody but the parents with these surveys. And Julie, it seems like you all did a wonderful job of getting this out and getting a lot of the public to join in. And also, I think it was really brilliant to take out the faculty versus, you know, other people. So thank you. I think it's really helpful.
All right, so let's now take a look at the third draft of the FY24 budget.
Or do you want to share that so you can move the screen?
I will.
there? Okay.
Yeah.
It says I don't have the ability to do that. Can you?
I can.
Should be good.
So she can do it now.
Okay. All right, and I'm actually going to start with the budget, the board budget workbook.
Or you're sharing your screen, not your, okay.
And I probably don't want to do that actually, because it's gonna be too big.
Give that
So,
number for-
is
put
it
that
too,
down there.
too small or can you see?
You need to make it bigger.
It needs to be
That's
bigger.
just my perspective.
Maybe I can do the slideshow. Is that big enough now?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, I just need to get to the right place then. So again, this is your kind of your long-term or the budget season's fluid copy of all the changes that we're making along the way through this budget process. Just a reminder that the second slide in this entire presentation has a budget timeline in it, so you can keep revisiting that to see what kind of where we are in the process. But in this draft, so draft 3, the expenditure budget you can see here is now $45,154,097, and that's 10.76% increase over last year, so up slightly from the last draft. I tried to highlight again just the general notes of interest from draft 2. Here we have the changes in the gen ed or instructional lines, and you can see the code here. I think that's sometimes helpful so you can follow along. But we needed to increase school-based substitute coordination to actuals. We know that usually that work, since we've moved away from a stipend model that's not allowable, does necessitate overtime for those wages. And so I've increased that to what is actuals. It is minimal overtime. I've included one full-time substitute in Swanton. That's kind of a new thing where they basically the substitute comes in, but every day would have an assignment. So they know to come every day. So it's a full-time sub. The actual FTE in Swanton for full-time subs is 2, but they've had a hard time filling one of those positions. There's a corresponding reduction to the normal substitute line that offsets this cost to the full-time sub line. I reduced the cafeteria monitor line in Highgate. That's currently just part of the support staff line. Also a reduction of approximately $30,000 in the other wages line. That was where we have kind of a holding spot for stipends or other supplemental pays for curriculum work or any extra work that professionals may do. We tend to use a lot of other grant funding sources for that. So I've actually reduced that based on actuals also. Lastly, in this area, I've reduced the vocational tuition line to meet the 22 actuals. This may increase, but I felt over the last 2 years, it's actually been down. But so we'll continue to monitor that. Under Gen Ed student services, I had to add in another service contract or the school-based clinician contract under Swanton. That contract has now been filled. It was open for a bit. We reviewed overall in the entire budget, actually have reviewed supply lines and book lines, equipment lines, things like that, and made reductions again, based on actuals where we could as possible. Made a small reduction in professional development for, it's kind of other, so it's not that pool of money that's for union agreements, but for other staff. I base that on historicals, and then oftentimes that's influenced by grant funding potential also. Increase the student management services line to reflect actuals as well. And then I needed to increase the mentoring stipends to align with actuals. We have a lot of new teachers each year, or the last few years, and they are mentored for 2 years. And so that was not an adequate funding in that line. Special ed instructional, so this is our special ed costs. We did have another additional out-of-district tuition student and the associated transportation, so I've added that in. We also had an additional student services contract in Swanton, so I've updated that to the actuals. And overall, when I was working closely with Becky and Marnie in my office, and as well as Tanya Hayes, in review of the special ed out-of-district transportation, we needed to increase that a couple of $100,000 after we reviewed actuals. These associated transportation costs have grown astronomically. Some of our out-of-district placement costs have doubled, pretty much doubled. And we have quite a few at the moment. So I needed to increase those lines to actuals. Unfortunately, with some of those agreements, we don't have a lot of negotiation power on the transportation side. But Julie, myself, and some other administration are working on reviewing all of the expenses related to transportation that we have that are outside of those contracts. So things where we're reimbursing for mileage or using a taxi service to transport students, we are reviewing those to make sure those costs are appropriate and if there's any potential savings. And then I just wanted to remind the board of just the major budget factors, so how we're getting to that 10% increase. And also a reminder that many of these factors are impacting school expenditure budgets and education spending across the state. I actually included here a link to my professional organization that meets once a month, where I actually recently put out a survey. And 24 school districts responded with basically these same budget factors. And so you can click on that link and find all the information there. But health and dental insurance premium increases for MVSD is about $500,000. Salary increases, those are both negotiated and what we've discussed with previous drafts. Approximately 1.3 million plus, of course, FICA and retirement and those other associated costs. Increased contracted services costs, approximately 360,000. Increased transportation costs, approximately 600,000. Again, most of that is there's an increase to our normal student transportation, but some of that is associated with the out-of-district placements as well. And the increase to the capital project line for the MVU roof phase 2 is 1.1 million.
Devin, do you want us to let her just complete the whole thing before we ask questions?
Yeah. Sorry, do you want me to continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So then it's that time of the budget process where we start to look at estimated tax rates. So here you can see the variance from fiscal year 23 to 24, and it basically walks you through the tax rate calculation. So if we look at our expenditures, we're up about 4.3 million. Revenues are down slightly, anticipated revenues, I should say. We don't have firm numbers on all of it yet, but this is where also funding sources like our anticipated surplus, grant funding, state and federal funding, mainstream block grant for special ed, things like that come into play. Anticipated to be down about 410,000. Which gives us a net ed spending increase of about 4.7 million. I did increase the equalized pupils slightly. We do anticipate that number to go up since coming out of the pandemic. I only increased it 5, didn't want to be overly optimistic, but for this calculation, I did increase it by 5. That would increase our spending per equalized pupil if we walk through this calculation by about $2,625. So our spending per equalized pupil would be that $19,053. Do have a note down the bottom though that the same estimated statewide average spending per equalized pupil for 24 is anticipated to be $20,155. So over $1,000 higher as an average. And we did receive preliminary yield information from the tax commissioner, and they're anticipating an increase to the yield of $2,165. That yield would be $15,479. So that would actually, even with the increase to the expenditures, reduction in revenues, and that $4.7 million increase in net ed spending would actually give us a tax rate that would still be going down because of the yield. It would actually be going down to 1.23, $1.23, or down 0.3 cents. Couple of things about that. I think it's important, and I did share the tax commissioner's yield letter with the board in the shared drive, along with this presentation and your board workbook. But basically that this letter projects a surplus of over 63 million, which buys down the equalized rates approximately 6 cents. This is statewide. They are utilizing a surplus that's that last year was a never before seen surplus of over 95 million. But this year it's 63 million. But what's important to remember is that in general, these surpluses at the state level are only in the range of 10 to 15 million. And so, you know, applying these surpluses moving forward is not going to be something that can continue. And so we should be mindful of that as we work through these budgets after 24 and forward. Again, at the top, you can just see the homestead property yield information over the course of the last 3 years, which you can see the increase of the $2,165 that the state is projecting. That's based on the budget information or the spending information they've received so far from the school districts. And then you can also see the spending growth rate that is also being forecasted by the state. As you can see in 22, that was 3.91%. Last year it was, or the current year is 5.35%. And then going into 24, it's at 8.52%, or an increase of 3.17. So it is increasing statewide significantly. And again, we know that's true based on the survey results that I had and all the factors that are coming into play with spending or expenses. And that's about it in your budget workbook. I don't know if anyone has any questions about the actual budget draft itself or anything that I've just shared.
Yeah, I'm gonna kick it over to Dawn.
Yeah, just a question, Laura, on the 416,000 thereabouts decrease, how much of that is tuition into the high school? Is that a big key player, or is the 416 doesn't have any key players?
I have that about level funded right now. I haven't played with that number yet. I'll wait until we get farther through the year. We're just getting those tuition bills now, so.
No, but you have a $416 decrease
In revenue? Yeah,
Yeah.
most of that is a decrease with the projected carryover, Don.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Laura, where is the bulk of that transportation cost increase coming from?
I'm having a hard time hearing you, Rennick. I'm not sure why.
He said, where is the bulk of that transportation cost increase coming from?
I think that, well, we knew that we had negotiated an increase with our contracted vendor, of course, for students getting to and from school, but also I'm assuming with our out of district placements, places like NCSS, Vitality, places that we provide services to students outside of our school, they're seeing the same increases. And in conversations with some of them, I think it's similar to the bus company, where it's not only fuel cost, but it's the cost of tires and parts and staff and everything. Inflation to everything is just driving these increases.
For example, when we send a child to Project SOAR or the Laraway School or the Baird School, because they have an individual plan that calls for that, it used to cost to SOAR about $7,000 to drive the student there and back. Which is required. Now that's $14,000. So some of those contracts just doubled.
And our bus contract, if you remember, bus contracts went way up.
Oh, I remember that, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big factor.
So it's the two things. So all of the transportation, it's both things. We have more kids that are out of district before, and then the cost of transporting them has increased.
And transportation is always a separate line. So throughout the funds, Anywhere you see a 2711 function is your transportation cost. So there's a transportation line under the general fund, there's transportation under special ed. But those, and you'll see it broken down by student transportation to and from school or out of district placements or other.
Thank you.
Terry has her hand up.
Do we ever assess, or do bus companies assess how much our buses are utilized? I mean, is every bus quite full, or do we have bus routes where we don't have full buses, or even three-quarter buses?
Do you want me to speak to Highgate at least?
Yeah,
They are full.
they are full.
There's one bus that I think has like some seats that have 2 kids in it, but most of our buses have 3 for the elementary and the high school, middle school.
See,
2
I
kids per
would
seat.
expect that in the elementary, but it'd be interesting knowing the high school, just how many kids. Because you have to provide for them, even if they only ride a third of the time. I mean, you can't say you can't.
When I've asked that question in the past, that was the answer, Dawn, that sometimes during certain sports or certain days when things are happening after school, there's less ridership, but then on other days, it's a higher ridership.
Terry, did you have a question?
I did, thank you. My question has to do with when you were looking at the very end, when you were showing us the yield and what the increase is going to be. My question really has to do with the wording that we have to put on the ballot. So even if the tax stays the same, the wording is going to be something that's problematic, I would imagine. The state isn't doing anything about that, right?
I'm working on it. I included questions about that in my VASBO survey, and I've actually been meeting with the Superintendent's Association and the AOE the last couple of weeks about that, hoping that maybe we can jump on legislation right at the beginning of the session with enough ammunition that they'll understand that it really is not only misleading, but it's not fair. That you're only comparing one year to the next. In high spending districts that have traditionally been high, or larger districts when it's percentage based, it's not fair.
Yeah.
I'm trying, I'm doing everything we can. That language is going away in fiscal year 25, but I'm trying to get it to go away sooner.
Oh, thank you.
So Terry,
this was a big topic because of the fact that it is so misleading to the voters when they are filling in their ballot. I think we may talk about this as a board later on when we adopt our warning language, and maybe look at the option of, we'll need to do some research, but fulfilling the statutory requirement and then adding additional language also to help clarify that, so that
Thank you, because I think it is so confusing.
It is, because the spending growth, you see how that yield affects things. The spending growth and the actual change in tax rate are very disconnected now because of our statewide funding system. So we need to do our best, as we did last year, to communicate the true tax rate impact of the budget. But the ballot article language is another really important spot for us to look
Probably
at.
the only way we're ever gonna address that is take it to the legislature. So if you're ever talking with a legislator, either somebody in the state senate or house, that's an issue, because that's how this all came about. Some of the people in the legislature that like education, but they're not pro-education, they just like it.
Yeah, we are trying to do that.
I was gonna ask, has anyone heard, I know legislative breakfasts don't typically start till after they're in session, right? But do they don't have one in December?
Not to my knowledge.
Well, none of them are probably, you gotta be sworn in, right, the newly elected, right? So, but I don't know why they still couldn't have that breakfast beforehand, but anyway.
They're still trying to get organized with
Yeah.
the parties and stuff. But January is usually second or third week.
One of the things that is on our board calendar, and I'll speak more with Devin about it, is to see if we can invite legislators to a board meeting and see who comes in January.
Yeah, like Laura, you were mentioning, I mean, there's no way you're gonna stop that train from, I mean, our ballots we're voting on our ballot in mid-January, right?
Right. I mean, it's a long shot, but in talking to Brad James today from the AOE, who does a lot of lobby, he works very closely with the legislature. It's not impossible. So I think it's worthwhile. And if nothing else, then it starts the conversation to better position us in the language moving forward, because we know this required language is going away, but what are they gonna replace it with? So.
Okay. Any other comments, questions about this draft? So I will note that our January 3rd board meeting will be devoted to the budget. We'll be doing a very deep dive, line by line, through the budget as we did last year. So folks watching this between now and then, this is the time period to give us additional input if you have any. That's a meeting you can attend, and there'll be lots and lots of budget detail at that meeting. So I'll just put in that plug now.
When do we have to approve it?
Well, should probably consult the timeline. I believe it's that second meeting in January that we.
Yeah. I have it scheduled for the second meeting unless we have a special meeting, something else.
So that is the target date, which puts it at January 17th. All right. Okay, next on the agenda is an update on mail-in ballots. I'm happy to give that update. So as you know, we needed all 3 town select boards to vote to mail out ballots to all registered voters. We had sent a letter asking them each to consider that. We know Franklin voted in favor. Highgate elected to not vote in favor of that, which really ends the question. Swanton was going to consider it tonight, but obviously no need since Highgate had declined that option. So, you know, they want folks to, my understanding is they want folks to leverage and utilize the absentee ballot process that's already in place. So we'll work with them, we'll work with the other towns to try to help as many folks utilize that as possible. There are different strategies out there. So the goal for everyone is the same, to increase turnout, and so we'll work through that process, and we now know how to proceed. All right, next is roof phase 2.
Before you leave that, is there any way that we could get the message on the signboards, Swanton and Highgate, about that January meeting, that the MVSD board's January meeting will focus on budget? So that if people want to give, I mean, I don't know if that night you only want us to do a deep dive, or if you want to hear from people. But if we want to hear from people before we go much farther after that, maybe out on the signboard. I know other groups have done that in the past years with their like library budget and stuff, so that people had an interest in that was the night they were going to do it.
Yeah, we can look at that. I mean, that board meeting is not a public forum.
Not a public forum.
Period. But if we can get the information ahead of time to help inform our decisions or conversations, that would, I think, be ideal. So, take that note. All right, are we ready to move on to talking about the phase 2 of the MVU roof project? I don't have on my agenda who's leading this topic. Am I looking over to Peter
ready.
over here?
Our chair is ready, I can tell.
I don't know, I didn't prepare anything because I went over this whole thing last meeting, so we went all over it. So to me, we as a board need to make a decision. Are we going to put it in the budget? Are we gonna have a separate line item just for that we vote on separately? Or are we going to do something else? Put it out to a bond or something? To me, those are the things. I think tonight we're looking at wanting to put it in the budget.
And so maybe Laura or Julie, can you remind us why it's on the meeting tonight to be voted
Great.
on its
Laura,
own?
yes, and Laura, jump in. So in order for us to get the work on the next pod done over the summer, we need to sign a contract now. committing to putting the next pod phase of the roof on, so that the materials can be hired, purchased, that the, the bidding can take place and all of that. So that timeline to commit to doing it is now. As Peter said, we talked about it at the last meeting. If we commit to it and then we have to make cuts to the budget, we'd still have to be managing putting that roof on. And we know that we have 6 phases of the roof to do in the future, so waiting a year is not the recommendation for the facilities committee, but it is something that the board would need to take action on tonight, whether they're ready to commit to doing the next phase of the roof.
I say go with it in the budget.
Say what?
I say go with it in the budget.
Is that a motion, Don?
I'll ask to defer to my chair.
I mean, that's what we as a committee wanted to bring to the board, so, yeah. I would.
You would actually need to approve the contract though, and that's been provided, I believe, a couple of times now. So not just including it in the budget, but we would need to have a contract executed.
All right, so we're looking for a motion to approve the contract, which I don't see in our.
1.1.
1.1.
The amount is.
I didn't, it was in there last time, Devin. I'm sorry, I didn't include it again.
Oh, I know, all I have to do is look, I know we talked about 1.1, 1.4.
Yeah, it's 1.1 was this one.
Yeah, that's fine.
And that, in the whole budget conversation we just had, that's in there, right?
Yeah.
Laura?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Devin, you have a question from Todd, right there.
From Ty?
Again, I think you guys are chasing it in the wrong direction. With everybody struggling, inflation everywhere's, that $1.1 million for a roof that's not failed. Not that we wanna wait for anything to fail, but we got a quote last month to resurface the arena roof, as large as that is, and it was less than $300,000 with a 20-year warranty. Now, I don't know, it's a completely different material, but maybe the discussion's already been had and I'm late to the game.
Did you see the presentation last meeting?
No, I did not.
Okay,
Sorry.
so yeah, the roof is failing. There's lots of leaks, and we're trying to do it in a systematic way, because I mean, just one pod, like we said, it's 1.1 million. Some are bigger, more expensive, and we've got to get the outside pods completed before we can do the inside one, where the majority of the problems and the leaks are. The longer we put it off, the worse it's going to get, the more expensive it's going to get. So we're trying to do it with the least amount of impact on the taxpayers. We don't want to go to a bond for multi-millions of dollars to get this project all done, and we still have a lot of other commitments that we need to our building. So that's our strategy.
It's also important to point out that MVU's roof is not a normal roof.
It's very unique.
And
Very
it is not something you can just get anymore, it has to be done more frequently. So it's switching to a membrane roof so that it can be a longer warranty, and that it's, the cost of upgrading that in the future is better than this weird foam thing.
We've looked at replacing MVU, we've looked at replacing portions of it because we know this expense, but you can just imagine what it would be, what it would cost to replace that.
Absolutely.
Laura, can you just, it's a very good question I asked.
Yeah.
And this isn't an exact comparison, but we just, can you maybe compare it to the sections we just did, which the cost was about the same, right? Like,
Right.
so can you tell us what we just did this past summer and what the cost was? we did a pod, right? We did one pod or?
We did one
Yeah.
pod. It's all in that, want me to share that spreadsheet that I gave you last time? Would that
Oh,
be-
it's okay, I just, some perspective, like, cause it cost us $1 million to do that pod too, right?
Yeah, so we did, phase 1A that was completed was C-Pod for $1,085,000.
Right.
The proposal we're talking about right now is to do D-Pod for $1.1 million.
Right, so I just wanted to say
I
like,
apologize,
yeah.
I didn't inform myself.
Oh, no.
You know, this was a great idea 50 years ago, but it's not a great idea now, because there's not another one probably. In Vermont, there's not another one, that may not be in America.
Not sure it was a great idea then.
Well, it was unique,
Yeah.
you know,
It's our roof now.
Yeah.
at the same time, they were selling something called cow wall for the walls.
And this is a 20-year warranty on this, right, Laura? Wasn't it 20 years?
John has actually been listening to our entire meeting, waiting in case there were questions, so he can probably respond to the warranty information more than I can. John from EEI.
Oh, I didn't know John was on.
Sorry, John, go ahead, John.
Laura promised she wasn't gonna call on me. You're lucky I'm not much jammies yet. Yeah, that is a, excuse me, I have the same goal that Laura does, by the way. That is a 20-year warranty on that roof. And with this phase, we're doing actually a little bit more scope than we were in the first phase. We're gonna add a new roof hatch access to get the current one out of the office that it's currently in. It's not really in a convenient spot for anybody that needs to get up on the roof to kind of crawl over somebody's desk to get up there. And we're also gonna paint the air intake hoods that are up on the roof. When you look at the video that JP or JR did, the new public relations persons did, the roof looks fantastic, but you can see how ugly the air intakes are. So we're gonna paint those both in what we the ones that we worked around last summer, as well as the ones in this new pod.
And on total square footage, we estimated it the other day when you were in the office. Do you have that number or no?
Don't have
Total.
it.
Yeah.
Total, it's a lot. 40 to 50,000 square feet. I can dig it out.
Yeah, we did the math.
It's a bit more than the total of the total square footage of the school because of the way the roof is chopped up and there's some vertical sections in the domes.
It's about 8-9 million to do the whole thing. That's a big number.
Divided by 302.
I can ask once
About
again.
35,000. Does that sound right, John?
Yeah, 35 to 40 maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll come back again and ask if anyone would like to make a motion to approve the $1.1 million contract for.
I would like to make the motion.
Renika's made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Dawn's a second. All right. So now we can have discussion about it.
So is the motion to sign the contract?
The motion is to sign the contract,
Which commits us to put it in.
which commits us to put in the budget. So this is where the potential risk falls, right? We know the timeline of this project does not line up with our budget timeline. The risk here would be a budget that's defeated, and then we need to go make cuts, and we have a contract that's already
So I think
signed.
Ty made a good point. We've got to get the word out that people don't think we're just, be nice to have a new roof.
Yeah.
You know, that this is a need.
But now it has to be done sometime. Now is the time to do it.
Yeah.
If to pass it up this year would be a real tactical error.
I agree, and are you referring to the change in the yield and the favorable tax
And where we
situation?
are with less money, the perfect storm is out there, and we have a chance to divert it a little bit. But if we don't do this roof this year, we don't get the citizens to pass it, I don't know where we go, because we're still gonna have to have a roof for the school. And so, and we're not in the greatest position, but we're not in a bad position either. And once we get that first one in the budget, then we build on that. So there won't be this type of leap after this year. I mean, unless something else happens, so I probably shouldn't say that, but as far as the roof, once we establish the 1.1 million, then we can stay with that as a baseline until we get to the biggie.
Comments?
Terry has her hand up, Dennis.
Terry does have her hand up. All right, Terry, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. At risk of sounding like a broken record, I think Ty really is helping us out here with this comment. I think it's really important that we remember we talked about that one district supervisory union that has the all that information about their facilities on their website, talking about what their plans are. I think it's really imperative that we do this in conjunction with the budget information, that the facilities committee start making some kind of formal way of letting our community know just how much the costs are going to be and what's coming up, and doing it in a, with JR, doing it in a concerted effort to help people understand and get people on board.
Terry, that's a great segue too, in that I wanted to be able to share with you that we did create a facilities page on the website, and it has the facility assessments up there, and facility minutes are there too, and it's a place where we can put videos about the roof and presentations about the roof. So yeah, JR got that started for us.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And I don't know, maybe Ty has some other ideas of how to get that out to people, if some people don't use the website, because I think that's going to be our, one of our major pieces here with the budget.
And Ty, I did want to mention also, we've started taking minutes a few months ago at the facility task force meetings as well. And those are on the website under that facility tab now also, if that's helpful.
What we need is a video of all the board members with a bucket of tar, a ladder, and a big drum. Saying, if this goes down, this is what's gonna happen.
I would just like to say the business manager has been on the roof looking at this project.
So Laura, I'm at the website right now. What we don't have, I don't think, is we have like a spreadsheet of
the capital plan.
Yeah, or do we want to make that better? I would think we would want to be a little more
Planning on
user-friendly.
making that public after the next meeting when we were kind of working through the budgeting of those items. And I actually added a bunch of more tabs that now include all the repair and maintenance items and what we do for contracted services and things like that. And then my plan was to put it there.
Yeah, so I would say that that's an opportunity, like, I think something of that importance, I would prefer to take our time and maybe JR, almost like a brochure online, perhaps. I don't know, that's a lot of work, but I think it's an important opportunity we have. So I personally, that spreadsheet's hard for me.
Yeah.
So I would imagine Joe Schmo or Jane Schmo going to our website and if we pointed to that, it might not be overly attractive to them.
Yeah, sometimes having,
Yeah,
I
no,
think
that's
of
a
like,
working budget.
Yeah.
I think about the Arbesser plan that's like 47 pages long, and then when I created like a 2-page color-coded thing, people were able to say, oh, that I understand. So if we maybe take the highlights, once that's solidified, we could put something together, like you said, that's a little more condensed and easy to read. Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Just remember, there's still a lot of people out there of my generation who don't go on a website.
Yeah.
They don't go on a website, but they do vote. If you're watching your town polls, that age group, 60 plus, they vote.
So how do we get to this? Do we have to
Mail it.
I have to look at tonight this diagram, but most people don't look at newspapers, I don't know. I think a brochure maybe of some kind, but I don't know how we do it, but.
Well, I will say, a lot of people mentioned, and I was on the phone with a community member who is a senior citizen today, who said they watched these board
program,
meetings.
yeah,
And there were a good chunk of folks that do watch these meetings.
That is right. I think when I was running for the Senate, being on this public access, I ran a regular program about Franklin County, was probably one of the most powerful things. People do watch this. Same people, older people watch that. But I think something that is informational, mailed at the appropriate time, is still powerful. There still are people who like paper. Not my
Local
grandkids.
stores.
Yep.
Local stores, people like to pick, they pick that up and.
We did do a lot of that, and we had to go pick them up again because people didn't take them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we have done that, and it's on our list of the multi-pronged strategy. But I do wanna, I will tell you something we haven't done that I wanna investigate how we do it, is have board members call people on the phone with a bulleted list of things to talk about. And so there's ways that we can sort of gather, who are the people in each community that you all know that would be important to reach out, so that you can call and say, either invite to a meeting, especially when we're coming toward the end with the budget hearing. But let me tell you about a few things going on in this budget. That's very powerful. That's one of the things that the rural council, that visit, that when we were you were probably on that committee with me, where we were planning for that whole visit. And that's one of the things they did, and I was making phone calls to people in the community to invite them, and those people came. So I think that's an important strategy that we haven't tried.
You know, and I'm not saying this is political, by the way it is, but I remember knocking on doors. You can knock on, you take a Saturday from 10 to 2 or 3 when people might be home, and you can hit hundreds of people with a brochure saying, this is our school district, this is really important to the future of our district, our high school roof in this budget. And if they're not there, you stick it mailbox, hopefully you don't stick it in the mailbox, but you do sometimes. That's how one-on-one contact, but that I think, I'm not saying every board member would, but I certainly would volunteer 8 hours over a period of a week to just go door to door around Swanton and other places in our town and leave a brochure.
Laura, what's the mailing cost for our whole district? I thought you sometimes know that. What, like
to do the postcards, that was printing and everything, was like over $3,000.
that's just a postcard, so if we had like a 5-page brochure.
You can have a threefold.
We did a threefold too, didn't we,
So
last year?
I'm just going to try to refocus us here because we
Sorry,
are.
Dad.
We have a motion on the floor about approving the roof phase 2. It's phase 2 here. It's phase 1B on this other sheet. So it's $1.1 million for the next phase of the roof. Is there any other discussion directly related to that topic? If not, looks like we are ready to vote. All right, those in favor of approving the contract for $1.1 million for the next phase of the roof, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 9-0. Alright, so, from what I just heard, I think maybe at our next meeting, we're on to future agenda items here, we can talk about some budget marketing strategies again. I know we've talked about that once before, but we can at least get an update and make some decisions on things if we need to at that point. Some things will be well underway by then.
We talked about legislative breakfast. Would it probably wouldn't work. I was just wondering if we had coffee hours or something. I'm just trying to think of ways to contact with people. Maybe, I don't know.
Julie, go ahead, Peter.
No, I'm okay.
I was thinking once, if you asked your Enosburg area superintendent and your Maple Run superintendent, if we decided as the 3 boards to host the meeting.
That's a great idea.
I mean, we buy the coffee, we buy you ever heard of Sonny Giroux? He used to do the best breakfast in the world. I mean, people came there, but anyway, we don't need that, but we could use the village complex and maybe other places we could use, but it should be a joint countywide effort, including Richford area there, but just invite them in. The regular ones that they do, legislators do a Monday morning, but when Richford was in the district, they went there Saturday morning. You go to Richford Saturday morning and have one, and just invite people in and say these things are important.
That might be an interesting conversation because a lot of our schools are in the same boat as far as facing capital and aging buildings.
And if we didn't wanna do it with the other two, but I think it has more impact if you
It
use the
does.
whole county.
I've done them as a region for other purposes, and it is,
But December would be the time probably to get them, or January. But once, you know, by the end of January, they won't tell you this, but the docket is pretty well set for the year. It may not be public, but as a committee chair, when we had just the chair people, we pretty much knew what was gonna move and what wasn't gonna move. That's what get us surprised.
Alright, so, future agenda items, we have our, board education session, coming up next, for our next meeting, December 20th. We'll have a public session in advance of that training, where we will have any other updates on the budget coming through. We have our support staff negotiations team, is getting started, so thanks to that group.
That's a rookie thing.
It's actually a really important thing to be doing. We had some really good success, retaining that staff from last year to this year, and we saw districts all around the state who did not have that success, so, we're happy with what's been going on. Appreciate you guys taking that one again this year.
that's a mistake, the next item. That's a leftover from the last agenda.
I noticed that, it said
Yeah.
retreat, right?
Yeah,
This is retreat, is that what you're talking about? Sorry.
no, the
Oh.
possible executive session,
Oh,
we
yeah, I
talked
was-
about the safety
yeah.
measure,
Yeah.
that's
No,
my
I was-
mistake, everybody. And
But
I've
the
looked
part
at it
about-
100 times.
The
and I
part about the
didn't see it.
retreats, not applicable
Are you
either,
saying
right?
I don't
Well, it's
get
our next,
another
it's our
safety
next
briefing?
agenda, it's a future agenda item, no, I think we're all done.
Well, where I read it was that the last sentence says our next meeting, and then it said /retreat.
So our next meeting is a retreat.
It is?
It is. So our next meeting, future board meetings, will be back here on December 20th, the Highgate Elementary School Library, 6:30, I think. We're gonna do a 6 o'clock budget first.
Yes,
So we'll be here at 6 o'clock for a public session. The agenda will likely be just the budget. And then at 6:30, we will start our board training with Phil Gore here. So that will wrap up our calendar year.
So that's our Christmas party?
That is, we,
Devin, facilities, will be meeting on Monday,
okay, we've got a facilities committee meeting on
the 12th at the central office.
December 12th, and I believe, we'll,
negotiations is on the 13th, and on the 14th is board goals, and I'll be in touch with Terry to get that started.
very good, all right.
Busy week.
I would just like a couple quick things, thinking about throughout the meeting, but could we, on a future board item, want us to email you, or can we just say it here, how would you?
Either way, if it's on top of your mind,
I'd be
might as well say it.
interested to know, going back to Ty's question of why we are losing students out of our district. Do you know, I mean, are they telling the counselors, hey, we're leaving the districts because of, I'm sure something, we might be able to dig up some information, so I'd like to
Yep.
kind of know that. And if we can go during while school's in session, I have Friday afternoons free, and I'd be game once a month to do a tour of schools open in session.
If you contact the principal, we'd be happy to accommodate that.
Perfect.
All right, with that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Jen has made the motion, is there a second? Rennick is a second, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.